This is Robert Bean's diagram showing all the interactions that happen indoors. There's all kinds of stuff going on. You know, you've all heard about conduction, convection, and radiation. Well, there's a lot of that going on in here. So the person is interacting with the environment in a lot of different ways. The building is interacting with the ambient and the other parts of the environment in a lot of different ways. So all this is very complex. We can't boil this down to a single thing like the air temperature. It's a lot more than the air temperature. So here are 6 factors of comfort. If you look at ASHRAE's thermal comfort standard, which is standard 55, there are more than 6 factors, but some of them are sub-factors. So there's 6 major factors. The first one, metabolic rate. Jumping on the bed raises it, sitting in a chair lowers it. That affects the amount of cooling that you need. And by the way, speaking of cooling, we all need cooling all the time. Our bodies are heat engines. There's all these chemical processes going on, we're burning energy, and we need to cool off constantly. Even when the temperature is minus 40 outside. And I don't even need to say what scale I'm talking about with minus 40. If the temperature is minus 40, we still are cooling off, because our bodies are producing excess heat and need to get rid of it. So we need to regulate that. And in wintertime, what we do to regulate that, we slow down the amount of heat loss, because if we're not wearing anything in wintertime, we're going to cool off too quickly. So we can wear clothing. So clothing insulation is the next one. So metabolic rate and clothing insulation are personal factors. These have nothing to do with the building. This is why 2 people in the same room can, one might feel comfortable while the other one doesn't. These are personal factors. Each person, is wearing different clothing. This is a classic example of comfort asymmetry. Is the two news people sitting at the desk reading the news, talking about the news, a man and a woman. And the man is wearing his shirt, probably with an undershirt under it, and a coat, and the woman is wearing a sleeveless blouse. And the studio is probably cold, and so she's probably cold, and if she's not cold, then he's probably too warm, because it's going to be difficult to make it comfortable for both of them. All right, now the factors associated with the environment or the building are air temperature, which we talked about, radiant temperature or mean radiant temperature, that's the radiant energy you're receiving from all the surfaces around you, airspeed. So when the air is moving, in summertime that feels good, in wintertime not so good. So the movement of air across your skin helps cool you, which if you need cooling is great. And then humidity, relative humidity, affects our ability to evaporatively cool ourselves, because that's one of the mechanisms we use. Our body has sweat glands. When the sweat comes out and evaporates, it takes energy away from our body, because for that water vapor to evaporate requires a lot of energy, and so that comes partially from the body. When the humidity is too high, we can't get that. All right, comfort is great, but it's only one of the components of indoor environmental quality. There's a bunch of other things. So comfort would be this one right here. That's what we were talking about, thermal comfort. But air, the quality of the air, indoor air quality, also very important for health. And then that is tied in a little bit with odor, because the air can carry odors from things, and that can be pleasant or unpleasant. That affects our indoor environmental quality. Vibrations. 20 years ago, I built a house, and I had 2 dogs at the time, and when we moved in, one of the dogs just could not be in the house. She would go in, and she would immediately turn around and head for the door. Because, let's see, we're talking about vibrations here. Because in that house, I had a composting toilet. Wait a minute. What does vibration have to do with a composting toilet? Actually, it's not vibrations. It was more of the next one, I think, not vibration so much. Vibrations are important. Let me finish the dog story now, and I'll come back to vibrations with another thing. So what was going on was there was a high-pitched sound from the composting toilet. Does anybody know about composting toilets? Anybody have one?
I've heard about them.
What?
I've heard about them.
Well, anybody know what the sound might have been coming from my composting toilet? A fan. Because the composting toilet was a big tank that was in the basement, and there was a small fan on it that made a little high-pitched sound that she could hear in the house, and that just drove her crazy. She just could not be in the house. So sound is important as well. Vibrations, the story that goes with that, it's not really a story, but one thing you're seeing more and more now with the heat pump craze that we are in the midst of is outdoor units mounted to the building. That's a good place to put them when it works, but you have to be careful because those things can vibrate. And if you put them on a wood frame structure that has resonant frequencies in line with the frequencies of that outdoor unit, you can get vibrations in the house that are amplified because of that resonance, and that can drive people crazy inside the house. Has anybody ever had that issue to deal with in a job? I see some nodding heads. So there are vibration isolators you can use. You can look at putting it in other places. Later today, I've got some good pictures of outdoor unit issues with heat pumps. And then light. Light affects us in a lot of ways. When the light is dim, we get sleepy, right? So in this room, I see the eyes getting heavy. You're getting sleepy. Your eyes are getting very heavy. No, I'm not going to talk like that. Light is very important. We want good daylighting in houses. That makes people happy. If you put people in a room with no windows, you have to do juggling and everything to keep them happy. So, gosh, you guys are a tough crowd today. All right. Anyway, this is indoor environmental quality, a bunch of different things we need to know to have good buildings. So let's focus on the air part and talk about indoor air quality and indoor air pollutants first. So there's a bunch of different indoor air pollutants we want to be careful with. Number one, particulate. Well, these aren't really in any particular order, but particulate matter is a really important one, especially the smaller particulate matter, the PM 2.5. And smaller. So PM is particulate matter. 2.5 there means 2.5 microns. A micron is a thousandth of a millimeter. So 2.5 microns is a really small particle. You can see the scale here. So if you take a human hair and divide it by 5, you're at about 10 microns. You divide each one of those by 4, now you got about 2.5 microns. So that's PM 2.5. Really small particles. You can't see them in the air. They're too small to be seen by the naked eye, but they are in the air. And that's a really important one. The reason it's important is because the bigger particles, the stuff that you can see, you know, when the sun comes in and the dust is floating in the air and how cool that looks, that stuff is not a problem because it gets taken out by your upper respiratory system. It gets trapped in your nose and your throat and your mouth before it ever gets to the lungs. But the smaller that stuff is, the deeper it can go into your respiratory system. And deeper, smaller particles means that they can get into the bloodstream. There's a lot of interesting work on that, and the national academies in the U.S. just this year came out with a big report on PM 2.5 and where it comes from, what the effects are, what we know about the health effects, the evidence for different respiratory problems and other issues with it getting into the bloodstream. So PM 2.5, particulate matter, really important, the smaller stuff especially. Smoke, again, this is particles, and this has a big range of particles. So wildfires, smoking doesn't happen indoors nearly as much as it used to when I was growing up. Smoking indoors in cars was very common. Both my parents were smokers, and I had asthma as a kid. Nobody made the connection back then, except when I was about 11 years old, I had a really bad asthma attack and had to go to the doctor, and the doctor told me if I ever smoked, it would kill me. Wait a minute. Shouldn't you be saying that to everybody? Because both my parents died of lung cancer. Smoking is really bad. Another one is nitrogen dioxide. This is something that comes from combustion. If you have unvented combustion in the house, you're probably getting nitrogen dioxide, another respiratory irritant. So unvented combustion, like these old space heaters or unvented gas fireplaces. And guess what, Canada? You guys don't allow unvented fireplaces. In the US, most states still do allow unvented fireplaces, which is crazy. Yeah. So unvented combustion in the house, a gas stove even was producing some nitrogen dioxide and other stuff. So whenever you turn on a gas stove or a gas oven, run the range hood. Why is my button not working here? Ozone, another really bad respiratory irritant. Some people use this as an air cleaner. They have ozone generators they put in the house for cleaning the air. You do not want to be breathing this stuff. It's great in the stratosphere where it absorbs ultraviolet. It's not good in your lungs, so don't do that. You can buy these things on Amazon. Look up ozone generator. They sell them like crazy. They sell lots of stupid stuff. Don't do it. Volatile organic compound, VOCs, all over the place. These are things that come out of materials like building materials, OSB in this case, or adhesives, and the stuff that we make furniture with, fabrics, carpet. Carpet is a really bad one. But the biggest spike I see on my indoor air quality meters on the chemical side, the VOCs, is when I open a bottle of whiskey. That's not a bad VOC, in my opinion. Some people, well, my wife disagrees with me on that, but whiskey, I mean, inhaling the odors from whiskey is not bad for you, although my indoor air quality monitor goes crazy. Mold. This was a house I was called in to look at one time, and there's some red flags when you look at this. The mold comes from having moisture problems. If you've got wet materials that stay wet long enough and are in the right temperature range, you'll start growing mold on them. Mold needs only a few things. It needs a relatively broad temperature range. It needs moisture. It needs mold spores, and mold spores are everywhere. So if you have those things, you're probably going to grow mold. In this case, one of the red flags is no overhang. When you have no overhang, a lot of you'll see this afternoon, I think, well, sometime today, when we get into the building enclosure stuff, overhangs really help buildings avoid moisture problems in walls. The less the overhang, the more likely you are to have moisture problems in the walls. This wall had when I was there, the drywall was pulled out, the insulation was pulled out, there was mold inside. They were remediating the mold because they had bad flashing. The other one is a roof wall intersection right here that's easy to screw that up. I'm going to talk about that a little bit this afternoon as well. And there's all kinds of places we can grow mold. We can grow mold on air conditioning registers because they get too cold and we're not controlling the humidity inside the house. Can grow under the kitchen sink because there's that little leak that's been going on for years and years. There's all kinds of places we can grow mold. So and the solution is really all about controlling the moisture. Hello? Hello? Oh, here we go. Allergens, another one. So this is, when you open the windows in spring, you're bringing in all that nice colorful pollen that comes in, and some people are allergic to it. Some people it doesn't bother that much. I'm a lucky one. It doesn't bother me that much. My wife and my stepson have been having a little bit of trouble with it lately. They don't have it real bad, but Some people respond to this more than others. Anybody know what this one is? It's in your bed. Dust mites. Dust mites. And it's not the live dust mites so much that are the problem. It's the poop that they make and the carcasses that get in the air. So when those things get in the air and float around and you breathe them in, they can create some respiratory issues. All right. Can't really see that very well, but there's a nice big spray there of bioeffluence. This guy's sneezing, and we're all emitting bioeffluence all the time because we're all breathing if we're alive, and these things are in the air. So all kinds of things are in the air. And come on. Viruses and bacteria are also in the air. That could be bioeffluence, or it could have come in from somewhere else. Okay, carbon monoxide. So this, well, you can't really see the black part. That's the carbon monoxide molecule, carbon and oxygen together. And the reason carbon monoxide is a health problem is that carbon monoxide is almost the same size and shape of the oxygen molecule, O2. O2 and CO are very similar in size and shape. And so when you breathe in carbon monoxide, it can get into your bloodstream, taking the place of O2, oxygen, and tying up into the, and getting into the red blood cells and taking the place of oxygen, so the red blood cells aren't transporting as much oxygen as they should, and that can cause severe problems, depending on how high the level is. One way to guarantee that you get carbon monoxide is to do something like this. Anybody seen a heat pump? Sorry, not a heat pump. A water heater trap in the flue?
I've never seen them like that.
Good. This is very dangerous. This is inside the building enclosure somewhere, and so the flue gases are supposed to come up and then go outside. But if they have to go down at all, you got a plug of cold air in wintertime that's going to sit there, and those gases are not going up that flue because they are not going to be able to go down. They can go up because they're lighter than the air around it, but when you get that plug of cold air in there, it's going to sit there, and that means that all the flue gases are going to get out from under this draft diverter and into the air in the house.
They got a good deal on it, though.
I'm sure they got a good deal. And in fact, they might have done this to themselves. You never know. This could be a DIY thing.
Wasted heat going outside.
It's heat recovery. Heat and carbon monoxide recovery. Then there's radon. You guys, this is a high radon area? I can't remember.
There is pockets. In
Pockets?
the area anyway, in Wasaga.
Okay. So,
Becoming more and more apparent radon
uh-huh.
in our area. So.
Yep. So radon is a radioactive gas. It's in the decay chain starting with uranium, and it comes down here, and let's see. So yeah, this is radon right here, and it's got these daughter products, and it's this one, I think it's these two. It's not so much the radon that's the problem, it's the daughter products. But what happens is radon emits alpha particles, and the daughter products that are problems emit alpha particles. Alpha particles are just a helium nucleus. A helium nucleus is pretty big in terms of atomic particles. The other kinds of radioactive decay are beta decay, which is basically just emitting an electron, and then gamma decay, which is just energy. It's a gamma ray is more energetic than an X-ray. But with radon, the problem is alpha particles. Alpha particles are pretty big, and if they are emitted in proximity to sensitive tissue, they can cause problems. If we got radon in this room right now, and one of them decays right by my hand, that's not a problem at all, because it's, the outer dead layers of my skin will absorb it. That alpha particle's not going very far. It's big, and it slows down quickly when it hits matter. But if I breathe in a particle, a radon or one of its daughter products that emits an alpha particle inside my lungs, That's where the problem comes. Because that alpha particle inside that very sensitive tissue can tear up a lot of cells and eventually lead to cancer if that happens enough. And this is in the Atlanta area where I live. This is one of the famous landmarks, Stone Mountain. We have Confederate generals and the president of the Confederacy carved on the mountain, unfortunately. But it's not really a mountain, it's a monadnock. Anybody know the difference between a mountain and a monadnock? All right, here's your geology lesson for the day. A mountain is created by the uplift, when two tectonic plates crash together. A monadnock is when you have soil and the soft stuff wears away and the hard stuff is left. This was the hard stuff. This is a granite. It's a big hunk of granite sticking up above the ground because there used to be a bunch of softer stuff around it that is all eroded away. So Stone Mountain, made of granite, and uranium is often associated with granite. If you have granite, you're going to have lots of uranium, which means you're probably going to have radon issues in houses. So especially if you're in a radon area, you want to get some testing done. In the US, the EPA has created a Radon Zone Map that looks like this. And the Zone 1 is the worst. Zone 2 is in the middle. The yellow, Zone 3, is where you're least likely to have radon problems. But even in Zone 3 areas, you can have buildings with very high radon levels. In Georgia, we have a bunch of Zone 3 areas, low radon risk, but I've seen the test results for some of them that are like 10 times higher than recommended.
So would that have anything to do with, because I know granite countertops and granite this and granite that have become quite popular over the years?
So the question is, what about granite countertops? And from my understanding, granite countertops are not an issue because it's tied up in there, and the decay of the uranium, if there's uranium in that countertop, uranium has a really, really long half-life. So it's a relatively small piece of granite, and any uranium tied up in there is probably not going to decay, or very little of it will decay over the lifetime of that granite countertop in the house. Good question. Feel free to ask questions anytime you want. I'm here all day. All right, so sources of indoor air pollutants, outdoors. So some of them come from outdoors, the pollen and stuff from the garage is coming from outdoors. Outdoors, buffer spaces. So another thing that comes from outdoors, PM 2.5. There's air quality measurements, public air quality monitors around, and you probably have websites and weather apps actually often show what the air quality is, and they'll tell you, how high the PM10 is, how high the PM 2.5 is. So when you have a bad outdoor air quality day, that should you might want to think about whether to open the windows or not. If it's really bad air quality day, you don't want to open the windows. Now, if there's wildfires nearby, obviously you're not going to open the windows, right? You may not run the ventilation system either. Buffer spaces, garage, attic, crawl space, basement, we talked about that a minute ago. The ground, so radon, but that's not the only one. Water vapor can come up from the ground and get into the house. Methane is another soil gas that can come up and get into your house. Cooking creates pollutants. Breathing, and some more, combustion. Air cleaners, we didn't talk about that yet. I've got more to say about that. There are some so-called air cleaners that can make your house worse. And we already talked about ozone generators. You don't want to put an ozone generator in your house. I have heard about people using ozone generators in their Airbnbs after somebody comes in, somebody rents the Airbnb, the owner comes in and finds that, oh, that person smoked, I can smell it. So they bring the ozone generator in. And as long as nobody's in the house, that may be okay, but I've also heard that just running it can create other chemicals in the air, on the surfaces, that can create problems later. So I'm not sold on any of the those kind of electronic air cleaners. Wet materials, because they can grow mold, and all kinds of materials that off gas. Your bed, we talked about dust mites. So one of the things that you should do to limit dust mites in your house is wash your bedding more frequently, including the mattress pad. So there's two questions to ask, and these two questions have to do with how you're going to treat the indoor air quality problems. One question is, where is it coming from? If the pollutant is coming from outdoors, that tells us right away, well, we might not want to run ventilation. We might keep the windows closed and have an airtight house. Airtightness is really good to keep outdoor pollutants from your house, from getting into your house. And then, is it a gas or a particle? Why would I ask that? We can filter particles. The standard filters, the media filters that we use in HVAC systems, take particles out of the air, but not gases. Now, there are activated charcoal and things like that that can take some gases out of the air, but the standard filters remove particles, not gases. Carbon monoxide will fly right through those things. Radon, right through them. VOCs, right through. So if we're dealing with particles, we can deal with that with good filtration. If it's a gas, we got to do something else.